Coping with Tre Tailor, giving you info and advice to help you thrive and survive in life, because we'll always be coping with something. Coping. Hey there, I'm Tre Tailor, and you're watching Coping. We're giving you info and advice to help you thrive and survive in life, because we will always be coping with something. Today, we are still coping with how to talk to our young people about tragedy. Lots of gun violence going on right there in our schools that are affecting our young people. Do you know how to talk to your kids about it so that they can feel safe and not feel scared, you and them? Well, today we are re-airing a show that was previously aired to talk about how to talk to your children about tragedy. Continue to cope, watch, and listen. Thanks. Today, we're coping with your conversation and communication with your little ones about tragedy and school shootings and racial unrest, non-traditional lifestyles. How do you talk to your kids? And how do you know the right time and the right thing to say? Well, today, Aaron Ashford joins us. He's with Transcendence Counseling, Coaching, and Consulting, along with Jeff Williams. He's Director of Behavioral Care Outpatient Programs at Prisma Health. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us today. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So listen, when is the right time to talk to your kids about what's going on? Because we've got a lot going on in the world today. I mean, we just came through, still going through, a pandemic, racial unrest. I mean, now it's, the school shootings. When do you know, when is the right age to talk to your kids? Jeff, you want to start?
Well, it depends on what age they are. Their comprehension levels vary depending on where they are in their development. So you want to choose the right age and the right content for their stage of life.
Right. So what is the right age, Aaron? Gregory said you got to wait until they're the right age. How do you know? Is it different for different kids?
I definitely agree with everything that Jeff said, but it is different for different kids. I think different situations are going to dictate different responses. I mean, I know that's like a complicated answer, but so it's always a right time if the child approaches you with a question about something.
Right.
For instance, I mean, like school shootings. I can remember when my oldest two, I think it was like the Sandy Hook elementary shooting like many years ago, and they happened to be in elementary school at the time. And I remember that being a conversation on the way to school.
Right.
So it's one of those things as parents, we don't like to talk about those uncomfortable topics, but when your child is asking you questions, I think it's very pertinent that you do your best to give them answers. Let them
You make a great point, Aaron, because I was going to ask that a little bit later on. Do you wait until they ask? Jeff, what? Do you wait till they ask?
I think you look for both verbal and nonverbal symbols. So with kids who are 5, 6, 7, they may show some behavioral signs of anxiety or distress, and that might be a prompt. Obviously, as Aaron eloquently said, you always respond when they ask you questions so that you can be the resource. You want to be the resource for information for your children and not let that be the media or any other outside resource that doesn't message what you want them to learn about that. And so, yes, both. Yes, you ask and you also wait for them to ask you.
I'll tell you, Aaron knows this, I have a 6-year-old and a 3-year-old. She's almost 4. And I had not talked to them, I guess, about anything. But the day of the most recent shooting, Julius, the 6-year-old, was in the car with me. And when I normally listen to gospel radio, NPR was on and the news came on about the shooting. And he immediately started asking me questions. He asked me 3 questions and I answered 1. And you tell me which one I answered. He asked me, why should I be afraid or should I be angry? Why are kids getting killed? He asked me, can men and men get married? And he asked me, was Michael Jordan and Michael Jackson the same person? I was only able to answer one of those questions. So I was totally unprepared. So I say that to say, by the way, Michael Jackson and Michael Jordan are not the same person. And that's the only question I can answer.
That's definitely the easy one.
But so that brings me to, I guess, as a parent, and Jeff, you and I talked about this before we came on, we need to be ready before we even think about talking to the kids.
That's right. You want to get centered, and you can always ask for a second. Say, wow, those are big questions. What made you ask that?
Okay.
And so sometimes it's obvious because you had a prompt, like what's on the radio.
Yeah.
And then sometimes they've gotten information from someone else. So when you look at their comprehension age, you want to first communicate to youngest children safety and security. That's not going to happen to you. And we've got a lot of things in place to make sure that doesn't happen here. And that's their reassurance. As kids get older, then they can abstract that you don't really have a lot of control over that. And then you'd have to answer at a more in-depth level. And you first check your own feelings about what you're about to respond. And you also make sure your response includes something that is negative or culturally biased against any one group or type of person, so that the message comes through clearly, but not with bias.
Yeah, I love that you can say, wow, that's a big question. Give me a minute to think about that, because I didn't want to answer. I didn't want to say the wrong thing. And all I could think of was Michael Jordan and Michael Jackson are not the same person. That's the only thing I could definitively say at that time. But so, Aaron, do we get prepared, to Jeff's point, do we get prepared, like, I guess, before each tragedy? I mean, when do you get prepared when the child turns 3? I mean, when do you prepare to have the conversation? Because you don't know when it's going to come at you, when kids are going to ask.
The world we live in right now, I mean, it's hard to predict when the next, tragedy is going to happen. But like Jeff alluded to, I mean, it's just like letting your children know that you're human too. As parents, as much as we think we do, we don't always have the answers.
Yeah.
And that's okay to say. You mentioned this never-ending pandemic of like COVID, and I just remember like this is a time I couldn't reference to my kids like, hey, when I was your age and we missed school for a pen, because it never happened before.
Right.
And it's okay to say those things, so you let them know that, number one, we're in the same boat, we're experiencing this like together.
Yeah.
And again, to echo what Jeff said, at the end of the day, I think kids just want to know, am I safe?
Yeah.
Are we going to be okay?
Yeah. That's good. That's so good that if you can just reassure them you're okay, I love you, our family unit won't change, then as both of you have said, then they get that reassurance. Aaron Ashford joins us. He's with Transcendence Counseling, Coaching, and Consulting. And Jeff Williams, he's Director of Behavioral Care Outpatient Programs at Prisma Health. And today we are talking about how to talk to your young kids about what's going on in life. So, Jeff, you alluded to this a little bit earlier. How much do you tell them?
Well, again, you don't want to just kind of continue to go over the details of the tragedy. That can be in and of itself angst producing and in many ways traumatic. But you want to more explore what's going on inside them, what drove the question, how are they feeling about the event. Tell me more about what that makes you feel like. Tell me more about what you think about that, so that you become that supportive ear and that they continue to talk about it. One of the worst things is that they just kind of close up and they're not able to have any means of expression except other people their age, which oftentimes is not a good expert opinion. People make rash and broad conclusions when they're not fully developed in their cognitive abilities to analyze an event. So that's important. So reflection back, meaning, so what do you think about what happened, and what does that make you feel like, is a real good way to continue the conversation.
Yeah, I love that, Aaron. When Jeff said, just kind of ask them, hey, what are you feeling? Why do you ask? What do you, kind of put it back on them to make sure, or to figure out what's going on in their head so that you can reassure and reaffirm.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. And I'm pretty sure Jeff has seen it. We work with pretty much the same population. And um, the weight of what these children and adolescents have been carrying, the things that they will open up and talk to Jeff or myself about, are some of the same things that they can talk to parents about. You know, like we got to kind of make sure we afford them the space
Yeah, yeah,
in almost a daily basis, you know, even checking in. I tell a lot of parents, even just kind of having some of those basic conversations. If you're picking your kid up from school, uh, what was the best part of your day? What was the worst part of your day? So you don't just ask them, how was your day? Because you know what you're going to get. Oh, it was great, right? You know, whatever. The one word responses. So you give them those open ended questions that gives them a chance to just really process that day. And I mean, I think that's so important, especially in times like this.
yeah, yeah. Jeff, you were sitting there shaking your head.
One of the things that we talk to parents about is to not get intimidated by the questions. Once you get yourself gathered, you want to not only find out what drives their question, but also find a way to share how you're feeling too. So it becomes more reciprocal. And, anything symbolically, with young children, we already know if you don't want to intimidate them, you get down on their level, you meet them eye to eye, you talk softly. The same thing is true for all children, that we have to find a way to bridge the gap of our stages or positions in life so that we can have an honest conversation. And one of the ways we do that is just reciprocal respect, asking open questions, being open about how we're feeling. If we're confused, to say that. But one thing I do know, the reassurance comes after. One thing I do know is you and I and our family are going to be okay.
Right, right. Geoffrey Williams is Director of Behavioral Care Outpatient Programs at Prisma Health. He joins us along with Aaron Ashford with Transcendence Counseling, Coaching, and Consulting. We're talking about how to have, often difficult conversations with your little ones. I want to ask, if they don't bring it up, do you bring it up?
Yes. To say more, wow, are you kidding me? Could you believe that happened? Did you hear? Because one of the things you want to do is, if they don't know what happened, you get the chance, the opportunity to shape that message.
Right.
If they do know what happened, but they're not saying anything, you don't want to pretend like, well, they didn't say anything, so I guess, you don't ever want to guess about how your kid is doing with a major event that could cause an interference in their developmental progress and their ability to feel safe and comfortable and able at school in an academic setting. You remember, school is their job.
Yeah.
So if I'm afraid to go to my job, how am I going to perform at my job?
Yeah.
So things like that, which feel obvious when you're not under the stress of the moment, but they're really important to kind of take note of when you don't have to have the conversation. So when you do, they're accessible to you.
Yeah. Aaron?
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. Just having those moments where you have that dialogue with the kids, especially about these major events, and also maybe the not so major events too, that we wouldn't think are major, but to a child it can be pretty front and center. So just being proactive and having a conversation, like Jeff said, so that way you can frame the narrative, so to speak, and it's not
Yeah.
hadn't been interpreted like sometimes the media does, where they put a slant on
Yeah.
things
Yeah.
oftentimes.
Yeah, I love that. So, okay, so we talk about, okay, talk to them about the major events. So, of course, school shootings would be one. At the time when they were home from school, the pandemic obviously was one. But how do you know what the major event is? How do you determine, oh, this is something I should probably say to my child?
I think that's going to depend on a number of factors. Um, again, where they are developmentally. I know there's a lot of times we start talking about awkward conversations, and a lot of parents feel, very awkward talking to their kids about sex. So we understand developmentally, like, whereas I might not have to have this conversation with a 6-year-old, I probably should have had several conversations by the time they get 16 about
Oh, yeah.
just having awareness of who they are, boundaries, just safety and things that of that nature. So they aren't hearing it from their peers who don't know anything themselves to be teaching our children. So just kind of understanding things like that. I think things we also want to take into consideration are cultural things. Things that matter to us from a cultural standpoint. That could, be religious beliefs, et cetera, that frame, your particular way of life. I think that's okay too. And like Jeff said, as long as it's okay to let your child know that we believe this. Not that it's knocking what anybody else does, but it's important so that kid understands, hey, there's some differences in the way that people, interpret things, and one thing doesn't mean more than the other.
Yeah,
I don't have to feel bad for believing this.
I love that you say that, Aaron, because I tell you, when Julius hit me with the, can men marry a man? I didn't know what to say to him. I mean, yes, they can, but then immediately I thought, okay, what city, what states is that? I'm trying to go deep with it, instead of just saying what you said, which was, maybe, yes, this is true. This is what some people do. Love is beautiful, that kind of thing. That's not my preference, but you know what I mean? But what you just said was great. We don't have a Jeff and an Aaron at the house,
Well, you do. You have that inner voice.
Right.
And you also have awareness. You also know your own life experience. So number one, for a 6-year-old, marriage isn't a real proposition at this time. So you can say, wow, well, that's something that you'll find out who you want to marry when you get to be older. What do you think about that now? And you let them say what they heard or thought, and you say that, well, legally that's true, and it's something that we don't worry about when we're 6. You've got other things to worry about so far. So you can go that way and deflect it, or you can get deeper with, we believe that people have a right to love who they love, but that is not an issue that you need to worry about.
Yeah.
When you're dealing with a teenager in controversy, remember that teenagers often pick the position that challenges the family narrative or belief system, because teenagers are, by and large, that's their job, is to figure out who they are. Yes, to be rebellious, but more than that, it's their job to figure out who they are. So we want to put that in the right developmental context, not take everything literally and then feel like we need to wage a campaign against the teenager's position, because that's a dead-end struggle. What you really want to know is, well, that's a pretty interesting position, especially given the things that we talk about here. Tell me more. And the last thing I'll say about it is, when you say, well, how do we talk to our kids? One thing would be something like this show, or another medium where you use the show as the way to introduce the topic. And then you ask open-ended questions and reflections about what the topic means and what you think about the topic. And you try not to become a proselytizer about it to negatively marginalize any one group of people or belief, but understanding that people are in their own process and development, and some people will make that choice. What do you think? And then you continue it that way. Be receptive is the real key to managing adolescence.
Yeah, during the pandemic, in the midst of the pandemic, Sesame Street had a couple of shows that they produced for young kids about the pandemic. And I really appreciated those shows because, again, it kind of talked about it on the level of a kid and from characters that they know and love and are familiar with. So I love that you say, introduce it, with a show. So just in summary, get down on their level, meaning physically level, talk softly, be open and honest, ask them what they think, kind of get their perspective. And from what I'm hearing from both of you, just reassure them that they're going to be okay. Anything else, Aaron?
I mean, I'm just a big believer in, like, it's kind of like you feed people what they can handle.
Right.
It's like, you wouldn't give an infant steak because they can't digest that, right?
Yeah.
And it's kind of the same thing with information. But the best thing we can do as parents is make sure that we have like open lines of communication. Now, we do know that sometimes kids will grow to a point, kind of echoing the Will Smith theme. Parents just don't understand. No matter how good your messaging is, they've heard it, but that's a little bit later in life oftentimes. But when you start to talk about those early, more formative years, it's an awesome opportunity just to have that non-judgmental space where they can be heard and there can be an exchange of dialogue. I think a lot of times as parents, we get into, I'm the authority, and that's it. And that's not going to be the most effective approach in getting your kids to open up.
Aaron Ashford is with Transcendence Counseling, Coaching, and Consulting. Jeff Williams is Director of Behavioral Care Outpatient Programs at Prisma Health. Gentlemen, thank you guys so much for joining us today and giving some insight on how to approach our young ones when life happens, and it is, and it will, and continue to. The biggest thing is, how are we going to approach our kids? Look, if nobody else learned anything today, I sure did, and I needed to. Thank you all both so much for joining us today on Coping. Thank you so much for watching Coping. I'm Tre Tailor. We're giving you info and advice to help you thrive and survive in life, because we will always be coping with something. For more information and the entirety of this interview with so much more information, please head over to the YouTube channel, Tre Tailor, for the full interview and more resources to help you cope. Thanks for watching.
Computers, they're a part of our everyday lives, but when they're not working, they're an everyday problem. So call Computers Unique, your everyday solution. 803-351-5821. Is your computer running slow? Won't turn on? Do you need a screen replaced? Or maybe you just need another computer? Well, Computers Unique is your one-stop shop for all your computer needs. They have a wide variety of new and pre-owned PCs, Macs, and tablets. So call Computers Unique, Dutch Square Mall. 803-351-5821. 803-351-5821.
Hey there, thank you so much for joining us on Coping. I'm Tre Tailor. We're giving you info and advice to help you thrive and survive in life, because we will always be coping with something. Hey, before I leave, I want to share this devotional with you. This is from Conversations with God. It's from Cheryl Mims Williams with Agape Counseling and Training Services in Columbia, South Carolina. This is such a great book. It includes some of her prayers, some of her diary readings, and devotionals. This one says, "Trust me, my child. I know you're having a hard time praying, studying, and focusing on me. I know you don't like the way this feels. You can't rely on your feelings." That's good. This is about knowing, being faithful, and holding on. Knowing even if you don't feel or see it. Isn't that such a wonderful reminder that God is with us always, even if we don't feel it, see it, or hear it? We've got to know it. That's what faith is all about. It's from Cheryl Mims Williams from Agape Counseling and Training Services. This is called Conversations with God. I'm Tre Tailor. Thank you so much for joining us on Coping. We're giving you info and advice to help you thrive and survive in life, because we will always be coping with something. The good thing about it is that we're never alone. Thank you so much for joining us, and I look forward to seeing you soon.
Coping, find peace of mind to survive through whatever. Coping, learning the way that we thrive all together. Coping, finding out what's real. Coping, we can heal, we can heal, we can heal. Coping with stress, coping with strife, bringing hope for success, for improving our life. Coping beyond hoping to do more than survive, ways to live a healthy life. Coping and promoting learning what you can do, 6 ways to a better you. Coping, find peace of mind to survive